Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers review. I don't even know what this is, Chris. It's not a morning briefing. I guess it's an afternoon one. Of course, we would have been at Dens Park. We were at Dens Park, but Rangers' scheduled game in the Scottish Premiership against Dundee was called off just 90 minutes before kickoff due to effectively a waterlogged pitch. Chris, we'll go straight into it. You and I were both, you were at Dens Park. I was almost at Dens Park when the game was called off. It wasn't even on my radar that this game might be called off until just as I set off, I seen a tweet from the Rangers account that there was a pitch inspection at 9:15. That was then pushed back. There was a second pitch inspection at 10:15. Anyone who has seen, as I'm sure everyone will have seen the pictures on social media, will have seen that was a pitch that was unplayable. Rangers didn't have any confirmation, as we understand it, of the potential of this game being called off until their kitmen arrived there. Now, the staff would obviously go before the first team to get everything ready for them arriving, and it was only when they arrived at the stadium that they were able to notify Rangers, who had no idea that this game might be kicked off. Dundee had ground staff and others trying to get this pitch playable from 5 a.m. this morning. They say there's been a lot of heavy rainfall, but I think this is the third time they've had a game called off this season, one of which was shortly before kickoff, I believe a game against Aberdeen when their fans were, some of whom were already in the ground. And we'll come on to what Philippe Clement had to say. We'll come on to what Don Robertson had to say. But I guess, firstly, Chris, you and I have, like many others, had a frustrating trip up and down the road today. Just bring us up to speed with what happened when you got to the stadium and a little bit more context as to why we're sitting here talking about this instead of a Dens Park with Dundee against Rangers having happened.
I think I've officially had my fill of Dens Park this season, having been there for the game earlier on in the season. Obviously delayed due to the accident that held up the Rangers team bus, and then the delays after the pyro show from the Rangers fans. That was an extraordinary night. Didn't think we'd be going back to Dens Park a few months later on. I turned left to head down towards Dens Park, and Graham McGarry, a colleague from the Herald, said game's off. We obviously knew heading up that there were issues, but like you, Josh, it wasn't even on my radar last night. Went to bed thinking, you're up early, let's just go. Had my travel plans, picking a couple of guys up, and we're all sorted. I actually saw some online chat this morning saying there's been a bit of rain in Dundee. This could be off, because I think people are now well aware of the problems with that surface, but never expect it to be at that level. Clearly, Rangers never expected it to be at that level. And I think as soon as the pitch inspection is confirmed, you kind of get a bad feeling. But 9:15, again, we're all heading up in the car, heading up the motorway. Word comes through, there's going to be a second inspection. The local referee has turned up, doesn't want to make the call on it. They're still working on the pitch. There'll then be a 10:15 inspection. And even as that news is coming through, and people who are sending out these emails and are sending these messages, they're making these decisions, they must know that that's far too late to be making a call on it either way. And you must know what condition the pitch is in. So we then got to Dens Park just as it was called off, just as the Rangers team bus was actually driving up the hill. There's a video of that on my social media accounts, seeing as the Rangers team bus arrives. The players also know at that stage, game's off, they go out, get a look at it, manager goes out, gets a look at it. And you don't have to be an expert to take one look at the pitch and know there's no way that was fit for top flight football in Scotland. It's just completely unacceptable condition for a pitch to even be considered playing in. And that was at 90 minutes or so before kickoff. There's no way that if that's in an improved state, I'd have hated to have seen it at 5 o'clock this morning when the Dens Park ground staff turn up. It's another somewhat shambolic day for Scottish football. A lot of people, a lot of questions to answer, and ultimately Rangers as a team and the manager have suffered because they wanted to get the game played. They wanted 3 points, wanted to go into the break top of the table. But Rangers fans have suffered. It's not as if everyone is travelling from within a half-hour radius. So I set off at 8:30 this morning. People would have been on the go a long time before that, and back in the door just before 2. It'll be a long time late into the evening before people are back home. Guys coming also from Northern Ireland, guys coming from England. You think of the expense on buses and trains and everything that goes into fans getting to games, and this is how they're treated. it's not on. It's a real poor show from everyone involved, and Rangers and the Rangers support are quite right to ask some serious questions over how the chain of events was allowed to unfold in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 90 minutes before kickoff, no one has not left by that stage, unless you live in Dundee. I'll read what a Rangers statement, a Rangers spokesperson said. They said, Rangers FC, on behalf of our supporters, are extremely disappointed and angered with the late call-off of today's match with Dundee. The first team have prepared as normal for the match, and it was not until this morning that any concerns over the playing surface were raised. It's not understood why the home club did not raise those concerns in a more timely manner, given the recurring issues they have had with their playing surface at earlier points in the season. The Rangers team and thousands of supporters had already arrived at the stadium by the time a decision was reached. This is the only match in the entire UK Senior Leagues to be postponed this weekend, and given it was to be shown on Sky Sports nationwide, reflects poorly on our game. And I think that point, one that Philippe Clement hammered home in every single interview he did, will come on to the Rangers manager, is a pretty stark one, Chris. The only game to be called off, the Rangers are saying, in the UK, the entirety of the UK Senior Leagues. What I think is undisputable is that the pitch was not fit to play. We're going to read out what Philippe Clement had to say because you spoke to him at Dens Park, not after the game as it would have been. But let's just hear quickly. We've got a quick clip. You can watch this entire interview on our YouTube channel with the referee, Don Robertson, who's explaining a little bit about why the pitch at Dens Park was not fit for a game of football today.
I was saying to the guys in the media that the consideration for me, the only consideration is the safety of the players. So when I inspect the pitch there, it's quite clear that it's not in that unplayable condition. The ball wasn't bounced. There's a couple of areas of concern in front of the dugouts and in the top penalty area where the ground staff have done a lot of work, to be fair to them, but the ball's not bouncing at all in some of those areas. It wasn't rolling. The conditions underfoot were dangerous for the players, so it's quite a simple decision.
I guess, Chris, what you also can't do is the referee, as Clement was at kind of pains to point out, is made the right call there. You don't want to play in a pitch where I think injuries would have. You'd been lucky to not get injuries from it. I didn't actually see the pitch. I know you did from that surface today. I'm going to read out what Philippe Clement had to say, which gives us a little bit more idea about the chain of events and how this came to pass. He said, speaking to yourself and others from the assembled media, we were not warned about it, not on Saturday evening during the night. I hear now that people started to work on the pitch at 5 o'clock, so in that way they did their best, but we were only told there was an issue because the kitman was at the stadium early. At around 9:15 a.m. He warned us about the situation, and for me that's a really strange thing. This will be the only pitch in all the leagues in Scotland where a game was postponed. That tells me it has nothing to do with the weather. Yes, it has rained, but it rained all over Scotland, and there were pitches in other lower leagues where they could play football. The ball was bouncing, but here the ball was not bouncing. Clearly there's something wrong. It's clearly in the rules that if the ball doesn't bounce, you cannot play a game of football. Also, there was 2 spots on the pitch where they put a lot of sand and there was no stability for players. It's really dangerous for injuries. Clement went on to say, I think it's a very important thing for the future that the league thinks about how to raise the level of pitches and put standards on like they do on other things. They have standards with things like lighting, for example, to have a good broadcast of the game and to have a good product. Sure, the lights are really important, but even more important is the quality of pitches, I think. Chris, we'll come on to pitches because obviously that's something that Clement's spoken about in games that have gone ahead in recent months. But just speaking to the Rangers manager after the game, and we'll come on as well to his reaction of why he doesn't believe this was a positive, even though he wasn't really travelling to Dundee with a fully strengthened squad today. He wasn't happy. You could tell that in a lot of his post-match interviews. And I think that the real tone of his conversation was, how could this be that we didn't have an idea about this potentially being called off last night? And again, according to Clement and Rangers, that the situation, they were only informed about the situation when one of their own staff members, the kitman, turned up to the ground a few hours before kickoff.
If Dundee have staff at the stadium at 5 in the morning, if John Nelms is there a couple of hours after that, and they see the condition of the pitch and they're then tasked with working on it and doing as much as they can with it, surely you put in a phone call to James Bisgrove or John Bennett or one of the Rangers PR guys or to Craig Robertson to say, we're sorry, but there's an issue here, just to make you aware. Rangers, like they usually do when they play games up in Dundee, and like else I did previously earlier on the season, stayed up in St Andrews overnight on Saturday. they would have been well aware of the weather. They would have seen the weather. They would have known that how conditions potentially could have been. I'm sure they would have maybe had a thought in their mind of, well, we know what that pitch is like. There's been repeated problems with it, not just this season, but in previous seasons. That would have maybe been in the backs of their minds. But when they don't get any communication from Dundee, you wake up, you go through your pre-match meal, you go through your pre-match routine, have your final meetings, however the manager finalises his preparations, and you get on the bus thinking everything's okay. For there to be no communication publicly to Rangers fans is really, really poor and completely unacceptable. There be no communication behind the scenes, even just as an earlier heads up to Rangers, is really, really poor and completely unacceptable. No, it's never been as easy to get in contact with people. It's not as if we're sending letters to them to say, by the way, there's a problem with the pitch. How many ways of communicating to fans and to the opposition club are there? If Dundee had any doubts over the pitch, first thing in the morning, that should have been relayed to all the relevant parties. And they should have known last night. I know that they've said that the pitch was okay for their game in midweek. That was a couple of days ago. Weather's obviously changed since then. We know the history of that pitch. You must have got a sense on Saturday night like that there may be a problem here. Now, that's not to say on Saturday night you alarm fans and you put something out saying, by the way, this game might be off. But even if you put your initial communication out at 9 in the morning, that's still late. When you consider the distances that Rangers fans travel, I think that's late. But Rangers should have been made aware a lot earlier. I think Clement is right in that. I thought he spoke well. I know he did several interviews. Spoke to ourselves, he's done Club TV and done a couple of others after the decision was made. I think he's made very, very sound points on a number of reasons across those interviews. Overall, it's just not good enough on any measure.
Yeah, Alex Kelly asking Chris, Don Robertson made the correct decision, but why wasn't he there at 9:15 for the initial inspection? I believe that's SPFL protocol that a local referee makes the initial decision, because Don Robertson, normally a referee, wouldn't be there 2 hours and 45 minutes before kickoff. Is that right? And obviously, again, they want to, I guess, give the game as much of a chance as possible as going on. But when you saw those pictures on Sky Sports trying to bounce the ball at about 10 o'clock, I think it was quite apparent that the game wasn't going to be on.
You do have some sympathy for the referee that was then asked to go and make that decision. It's obviously it's not his game. He's just got the phone call to say, look, we need someone to go and have an inspection of the pitch. You're the closest one, or you're one of the local ones to it. Can you get along and have a look at it? When you consider the pressure he's under to then make a decision on it when it's not his game and it's not his ball, basically, he's got Dundee saying we also want it on because there's financial implications for them. Rangers want the game on for different reasons. Sky clearly want it on. I'm sure there would have been a lot of pressure, not Sky putting pressure on them to make it, but you're fully aware of the situation. It's a big call for a referee who isn't in charge of that game as such to then make that decision. So you can understand why he then puts it back. But when you then get to 10:15, I say it's then even later, the situation then becomes even more unacceptable for travelling fans. I think if the whole process should have started a lot earlier in the day, arguably should have started last night, with Dundee then working on the pitch to try and do something with it overnight. But I think that the whole process and the way the process has unfolded, I think that's really upset Philippe Clement, and he's clearly not happy with the communication. He's had no issues with the decision that Don Robertson made. I think it became fairly obvious. So you take one look, you throw the ball up, and there's no bounce there at all. It's like throwing a bowling ball down. It's just not going anywhere. So I think Don Robertson has turned up. He's made the right call. It's not his fault in this regard. He's just followed his protocols. Mm-hmm. But protocols, I think, have to be looked at, because we can't have this situation. I know Aberdeen fans found themselves in a similar situation at Dens Park earlier on in the season. Clearly, lessons haven't been learned from that, and I think Dundee have major questions to answer here, and I think it's something for the SFA, SPFL to look at as well in terms of the timings of how these things actually unfold in the future.
Yeah, I guess a wider point, Chris, is, and we'll get to comments, loads of comments coming in, so we're going to get to them as well. But just finally, before we kind of look ahead and what Clement had to say about kind of whether it was a positive if this game was called off, and spoiler alert, he does not think there is any sort of positive effect of this. Pitches in general is something that he's brought up quite often away from home. Todd Cantwell's injury at St Johnstone, I'm not saying that was caused by the pitch, but after that game, not only did Clement say, I believe, to the papers that he felt like Cantwell could have been potentially protected a little bit more from the I guess the kicks he was taking that day, but also in that game and others, he's spoken about how Rangers have had to adapt their style of football because of the pitches they're playing on. I mean, you or I, or anyone watching Scottish football, are not saying anything controversial by suggesting that pitches should be better. The better your pitches are, the better product you have, the better your product is, the more opportunity Scottish football has to grow. It is clearly something that he, as someone coming into the league from a different vantage point, as someone who has not worked or played in Scottish football before, has identified as an issue. And I guess today kind of heightens it and proves his point, doesn't it? Because that is a pitch in the top flight of Scotland. It's a televised game at 12 o'clock. It's a Sky Sports game. A lot of people would have been watching it. Pitches just in general, especially in the top flight. I know we have this conversation about astro pitches and why a lot of us, you and I probably included, believe it should always be grass pitches. How you facilitate, because I'm sure clubs would come back and say it's about budgets and there's limited budgets, and that's totally fair. It's a more nuanced argument than just saying all clubs have to spend X amount of money on their pitch. But I don't think it's controversial to say that pitches need to be better, and the only way you're going to improve Scottish football as a product is if you have pitches that not only are going to make sure that this does not happen and games are not called off, but that allow you to play a certain type of football that we've seen even just this year since the winter break. That has not always been the case when Rangers have been playing away from home.
I think we've almost been spoiled by the Ibrox surface over the course of the season, because even at this stage, a lot of football being played on it. Having come through the winter, the surface there looks in brilliant condition, and while we can give other pitches a hard time, I think it's only fair that we say well done to the Ibrox ground staff for the job that they've done in terms of keeping the surface there looking really, really pristine and playing well, so the team can then go and play the style of football that the manager wants them to play. As you say, that he's mentioned St Mirren, he's also spoken about the plastic down at Kelly. St Johnstone one. Dundee's has been notoriously bad for some time, and as you mentioned there, Josh, if the game had been given the go ahead, if it had just scraped through the inspection, what kind of game would it have been? What kind of spectacle? It wouldn't have been enjoyable for the players, wouldn't have been enjoyable for the fans and for ourselves in the media to go and watch. And if you're tuning in, whether you're a Scottish football veteran watcher or whether you're someone watching for the first time, you sit there and you put on your Sky Sports and you're sitting watching it, and that's the picture served up. What message is that sending out of here is one of the 12 best teams, one of the 12 best clubs supposedly in the Scottish top flight, and this is the best surface that they can provide for a game in March. It's not as if we're sitting and it's 2-3 days before Christmas. The pitch should have had time to recover from the winter by now. So it doesn't bode well. We talk about how much money Sky are putting in, how much sponsors are putting in. It's all part of different conversations, but all part of the one big conversation. How do we? You can't improve Scottish football as a product. You can't improve the style of it. You can't improve the quality of players. You can't improve the quality of teams if that's the kind of surface that they're playing on, because that then doesn't lend itself to an attractive style of football. It doesn't lend itself to entertaining games of football. If it's not entertaining, why would you pay to watch it? If you don't pay to watch it, there's then no money in the game. So I know every pound is a prisoner for clubs. It's easy to say the Rangers pitch is great because they invest time and money and effort into it. That's obviously a factor. But there's other clubs who have pitches that are far better than the one at Dens, who don't have the budget of Dundee, who don't have the budget of St Mirren that the manager has mentioned, or St Johnstone. And that's before we even get into the plastic debate about Kelly. Thankfully, theirs is coming up. And Livingston, there should be no excuses. If you know how much of your budget you have to spend on a pitch, it has to be spent wisely and it has to be spent better, because as part of the Scottish football product, it's doing nobody any favours.
Yeah, I agree. Right, let's get to some comments. Chris, we've spoken a lot about the pitch. Let's look forward. Jack Finlay says, On a positive side, it gives the injured players a chance to be fit. John says, terrible, but take the positives from it. It gives us a week's rest after a hard game on Thursday. Hopefully have Sterling back and one or two others. Christopher taking a bit of a different point of view, which I think Philippe Clement tended to agree with. This will be another midweek game we don't need. Cami saying, who knows, maybe it's best. Probably we'd have dropped points on that pitch today. Lauren saying, pros, a weakened and tired team. Get to regroup cons. We're 1 point behind Celtic with a game in hand. And finally, Jim saying, toughen the supporters who travelled. Seemed the right decision, but at least we avoided a potential dodgy result on a poor pitch and any potential injuries. Clement said when he was asked, because that was kind of my instinct, you and I were speaking there on the phone driving up, not about the pitch, not just to have a chat for the whole duration of the journey, as colleagues as we are. But we were kind of saying, look, Rangers only made one change between the starting 11 over the past 3 games, Chris, which was a taxing double header against Benfica and a difficult away game against Hibs. And Clement, someone who's changed his team a lot, he rotates a lot, he wants to rotate and keep everyone fresh. He's clearly not had the chance to do that, and the only reason he has played the same team effectively, and when he picked the same team at Easter Road as he had away in Lisbon, that was the first time he'd picked consecutive starting 11 since he came to the club in over 30 games now. The only change was enforced, Scott Wright coming in for Dujon Sterling at home in the home leg against Benfica. So it's clear that Rangers are running on empty a bit. So I guess on one point of view you think, well, do they then go to a difficult away venue in a little bit of a better state of mind? Is there a risk today that without much off the bench, that at one point the injuries are going to catch up with them? Because I think at the end of all 3 recent games, both ties against Benfica, when the game went 2-2 over in Lisbon, and also in the home tie when they were chasing it on Thursday, and also in Edinburgh last Sunday against Hibs, I think they've tired towards the end of games naturally. But when Clement was asked a question of that description, he said, there's only negatives today. We were ready for this game and have very important weeks to come and play final games before the top 6. It's going to be difficult now to put this game in between, and it's a disadvantage if you have a midweek game and the other team has 1 week of preparation. So I don't see any positives from this. We have internationals going away now and we cannot train today. Normally I always find something positive in every situation, but today I cannot say anything positive. Not mixing his feelings there, and you can understand why, Chris, if he's got players going away, he'd wanted to get this game taken care of, and although Clement had limited squad options, he'd have still been, I guess, hopeful, much like going away to Easter Road last weekend, that Rangers would have been able to do the job. How do you see it? Because having reflected on it and listened to what Clement said, while it does, Rangers are still in a really good position, and they're only not top because they've got this game in hand. But equally, you wanted to get to this international break and allow yourself to get the squad in a better situation. There's hardly any options there. I don't think McCausland would have started today. We know Dujon Sterling wouldn't have done so. Fabio Silva is still playing on the left, and there's not many options behind him. I mean, how do you see that debate? Do you think there's any positives here for Rangers, or is it just pure frustration because they wanted to get this game out the way, and now it's going to disrupt a free midweek before potentially an Old Firm game or another really important game in the fight for the title?
I think it's one of these questions. There's probably no real answer. It's one of these you can fall on both sides of it, and you can't really be right or you can't really be wrong. I think the Clement would have backed his side, whatever side he picked, whatever 11 he was able to field. He would have backed them to go and win that game, get 3 points on the board, get back top of the table, go into the break with a bit of momentum, bounce back from the frustration of Thursday night and be in a really good place, and then send his internationals off and then work with the rest of the squad. And it's then all focus on this last tranche of fixtures in terms of the Premiership title race. I know the theory is, well, it gives them a bit more time, but as the manager outlined, it's then eating up a midweek that they wouldn't necessarily have factored in for.
Yeah.
Would you rather go to Dens Park 4 days or so before an Old Firm game? Probably not. Do you want to go to Dens Park and then have to go to Ross County on the Sunday? Probably not. But that's the situation that Rangers now facing. So the game has to be played before the split. So I can understand why the manager has taken the position that he has, and I think in an ideal world he's probably right. He would still have wanted it played, wanted it won, wanted it taken care of. It's ticked off. It's done. It's been, and it's then all focus on the future. It's just another another issue that he has to contend with. But he's been very good at dealing with so many issues over the course of his tenure so far. So I do understand why people are saying it could be a positive, because it gives guys a chance to get back. By the time the game comes around, hopefully Cantwell's a bit more up to speed. Who knows what the situation could be with Seema. Also, the guys that are working their way back up, like Wright, like McCausland, hopefully like Dujon Sterling, they're in a better place. It should be a stronger, better equipped Rangers side that goes back to Dens Park. But you would have backed whatever side the manager put out to go and actually win the game today. Anyway, it's not as if Rangers have avoided a defeat. Yes, it carried a risk, but so does the game in a couple of weeks' time when they go back there. It's a tricky away game in the middle of a title race. Of course, it's a potential banana skin. So I think on balance, I can see both sides of it. I think I have to agree with the manager. It would have been better to get it played, to get it won, and to move on, and you then just deal with what's to come. So it is an issue for Rangers, but I say he's dealt with so many of them. It's just another one to add into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow morning on the briefing, we're going to, I guess, look back a little bit more at the last couple of months since Rangers came back from the winter break. But I guess just to close, Chris, Rangers are in a really good position, aren't they? Despite the fact that they have not been able to play this game today, their record's been really good since coming back from the international break. There'll be frustration, as we've covered for the last 26 or 27 minutes or so, a lot of frustration at what is an unacceptable situation today. And as I think Clement repeated in a lot of interviews, Scottish football needs to promote itself better, to help itself in probably a lot of ways, and pitch quality is definitely one of them. When he's had a couple of days to sit back and reflect, he's got Todd Cantwell coming back into the squad. He'll be fully fit by the time you'd imagine the international break is over. Dujon Sterling, his injury isn't too severe. Rabbi Matondo has come back into the fold and is away with Wales, which would suggest that he has recovered from his latest setback. Who've missed Abdallah Seema. We hope and hear is not too far away as well. Clement was obviously speaking about him after Thursday night's game against Benfica. How do you see Rangers going into this international break, Chris? A lot of very, very important games before the split to come after it. They've done everything they can. This has been taken out of their hands, and now they have to, as you say, navigate this game at a tricky time. But they've done that pretty consistently with limited options since Clement came to the club.
He's not had much choice but to. Now he's been dealt a really poor hand at times. I think it's a testament to, one, his man management and his squad management, and two, a testament of the physicality of some players, the mentality of others that have managed to get through this run. Obviously, huge frustration on Thursday night. The Motherwell game at Ibrox is one that I still can't actually quite believe happened.
I totally forgot about that when I was saying that there. Obviously, because of the weekend, it was almost never spoken about again. But I guess the response since then, you would think that has been Rangers hit the wall moment, isn't it? And they have responded after that. But I think they have looked tired in the last 3 games. And again, that's not criticism, understandably so. This break comes at the right time for them. The only frustration is that obviously they don't have this last game today to tick it off. Rangers will come back from the international break and they will play Hibs at home. Then it's the Old Firm game. Then they go to Ross County. They have the Scottish Cup semi-final against Hearts the weekend after that. And the rearranged trip now between Rangers and Dundee at Dens Park will be somewhere in between there. If people have not subscribed to the Rangers Review, always a great time to do so. Loads of reaction from today's game, why the game has not went ahead. All the reaction from various parties is available on there. Lots of content to come over the course of the international break as well. And we're going to have full coverage of the Women's Cup final next weekend. The Women's Old Firm takes place, I think, 4:10 today. I believe it's on BBC Alba, Chris. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that is obviously a huge game as well, which I'm sure a lot of people will look forward to watching. But until then, thanks to everyone for joining us. Sorry we didn't have a game to speak about, sadly out with our control. Chris and Derek will be back in the morning to reflect a little bit more on today's events, but more look back at the last couple of months for Rangers and look ahead to a defining couple of months in the league and cup race. Until then, thanks very much for joining us. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.